Welcome to the Daily Tanya. Today is Monday, the 23rd day of Sivan. And today's class is dedicated in memory of my dear father-in-law, Rabbi Bronstein, Chassid Tzvi Hirsch ben Rabbi Shlomo Zalman. And he was actually very instrumental here in Sheepshead Bay to help us establish the Chabad house. And today's his 20th yahrzeit. So may this class be in his memory, and may we be reunited very soon with him at the coming of Mashiach, right here. So let's begin with tzedakah, gedayla tzedakah, shemekareves geula. So today we continue in chapter 7 in Shar Haychud VaHaEmuna. The Alter Rebbe talking about the unity of Hashem, and the Alter Rebbe now talks about clarifying the concept, the doctrine of the Tzimtzum, the contraction that we know. We spoke about it many times, what it says from the Arizal. Rabbi Yitzchak Luria explains that for Hashem to create this world, he needed to do the tzimtzum, the contraction. Now, what does that mean? There are some sages that misunderstood what the Arizal said. And they took it literally, that Hashem contracted and contracted his light, meaning that he did not want to be in this world, in this physical lower worlds. So what the Arizal says, in paraphrasing what the Arizal says, he says that in the beginning the presence of Hashem was filled the entire place. And for the sake of, he wanted to create the world, he removed his light and there was an empty space. So obviously we cannot take those things in the literal sense. Obviously means has the deeper meaning. What does it mean? So the way some of the sages understood this to mean was that in order to create a world like we have, a world that is godliness is not seen. You see, it's a very low world with low creatures. And in a way, they said this would be humiliating to say that Hashem is in those low places. And they explained that there was a tzimtzum, there was a contraction. They took it literally, what the Arizal says, they took it literally, that Hashem contracted his light and he removed his light. And it's not that he doesn't watch everything, he watches over from far. Like a king is in the palace and watches through the window, making sure everything is running okay. And Alter Rebbe says, based on what we explained and we studied in this past few lessons in these chapters, we understand the fallacy of this understanding for two reasons. Number one, the whole idea of removal of from one place, removing himself from a place just doesn't make sense. And first of all, it says it goes against our basic beliefs in Hashem. You're attributing to God corporal elements, meaning when you're saying that Hashem was here, was removed, even in the spiritual, conceptual sense, you're attributing to God something which is corporal. In other words, when you're saying something is here, that it takes space. For example, you're talking about a logical reasoning. if you understand a certain concept, 1 + 1 = 2. Where does 1 + 1 = 2? Is it here? Is it there? Obviously, it's everywhere. But you still have to have an intellect to place that logic. That logic is not in the rock. The rock doesn't understand that. You need a brain to understand this concept. And this is something that can be said only in terms of corporal humans. We speak in this language. But when we're talking about Hashem, to say that he removed his light, he removed from one place to another place, you're attributing to God the things that God is way beyond and above it. So Hashem cannot be said about Hashem that he removed. What does it mean removed? The way the Alter Rebbe explains that Tzimtzum, contraction and removal, means concealment from our perspective. So that's number one. And number two, the Alter Rebbe explains that these people, obviously, rabbis who made a mistake, they misunderstood this concept, but they obviously believe that Hashem controls everything. There's divine providence in everything. But based on what we explained, that Hashem knowing something, controlling something, is not like humans, not like us, that our knowledge is separated from us, but Hashem is one with his knowledge. Him, the knowledge, the subject, it's all one. And therefore, what the Rebbe explains, and he brings also from the Zohar, which preceded the Arizal, obviously, understanding, and we see that we cannot say that contraction, that Tzimtzum, means in the literal sense. So let's see inside what the Alter Rebbe says. V'hine, mikan, in the light of what has been said above, that God's knowledge is wholly one with God himself. For otherwise, it would imply multiplicity in one who is perfect unity. That's what we explained. Hashem and his knowledge is all one. Based on this understanding, we can understand the mistake what the some sages did. It is possible to understand the errors of certain scholars in their own eyes. May God forgive them. For even those who have erred unwittingly are in need of atonement. It says, they erred and misinterpreted in their study of the writings of the Arizal, Rabbi Yitzchak Luria, and understood the doctrine of Tzimtzum, which is mentioned therein. They understood it literally. They understood that the Holy One, blessed be He, removed himself and his essence, God forbid, from this world, meaning that he literally removed his presence rather than merely concealing it. They understood that Hashem only guides from above with individual providence over all the created beings which are in the heavens above and on the earth below. That's what they believed. They understood that Hashem only watches over from above. Says the Alter Rebbe, obviously that's a big mistake. Now, says the Alter Rebbe, apart from the fact that it is altogether impossible to apply the doctrine of Tzimtzum literally, for that would be an instant of corporal phenomenon, concept of removal from one place, another place. It can be here, cannot be there. It's not something you can attribute to something which is not corporal. And we're not talking about removing the physical sense, even the more spiritual sense. So that you cannot attribute to the Holy One, blessed be He, who is set apart from them by infinite myriads of separations. So if Shalema Tzimtzum Kipshuta Shemikra Guf ala Kadosh Baruch Hu anivdel mehem ribui revovois avdalos adenkates. So that's number one. You cannot attribute this concept to Hashem. In addition to the Alter Rebbe, even logically, it doesn't make sense. In this thing itself, they also do not speak wisely. Why? Since they are believers, sons of believers, and they believe that the Holy One, blessed be He, knows all the created beings in this lower world and exercises His providence over them. And now, based on what we learned, what does it mean Hashem knows them? Hashem gives the divine providence, is that Hashem, with His knowledge, is one thing. You cannot separate them. And therefore, He says His knowledge of them does not add plurality and innovation to Him. Because He knows all by knowing Himself. That's what we learned yesterday, the idea, the concept that Ani, Hashem, Lo Shaniti, I, God, have not changed. Hashem doesn't change. Nothing, no creation that adds anything in Hashem. Because it's all within Hashem Himself. Thus, as it were, His essence and being and His knowledge of the created beings are all one. Now, the Alter Rebbe brings and shows this idea in the teachings of the Zohar itself. And this is what it is stated in Tikkunim, that's from the Zohar. There is no place devoid of Him, neither in the upper world nor in the lower world. So the way those sages explained it differently, they would say there's no place devoid of his hashgacha pratis, of His divine providence. But obviously here the Zohar says minei, from Him. Thus we find it explicitly stated in Tikkun Zohar that God Himself is to be found within the lower worlds, the lowest of which is this physical world. Then there's another place in Zohar, Raya Mehimne Parshas Pinchas. There it says, Iyu tofis bekula v'leis man dev tofis bein. Iyu soivev kol almin v'leis man de nofing meshus eleba. It says in portion of Zohar called Raya Mehimne and Parshas Pinchas, it says, He grasps all and none can grasp Him. He encompasses all worlds and no one goes out from His domain. He fills or permeates all worlds. He binds and unites a kind to its kind, upper with lower. And there is no closeness in the four elements of which this corporal world is comprised, except through the Holy One, blessed be He. When He is within them, only when Hashem is within the elements, they can come together. It is only through His power that these four inherently contradictory elements are bound together, like fire and water, for example. Those are elements that everything is composed of. Ad kan l'sheinu, until here are the words of the Raya Mehemre. Now the Rebbe goes on to explain, leis man de tofis bei. None can grasp Him means she'ein mishet itfois ba'sogas sichlo mikos cholim elyonim. That there is no one, even among the all among all the supernal intelligence, meaning the incorporeal creatures of the higher spiritual worlds whose apprehension of divinity is superhuman, they also cannot grasp Hashem's intellect. They cannot. There's no one from them who can grasp by means of his intellect the essence and being of the Holy One, blessed be. As it is written in Tikkunim, that he is hidden from all the spiritual worlds which are themselves hidden. Meaning the spiritual worlds that are hidden from us and from many other levels, Hashem is hidden from them also. And no thought can grasp you at all. And therefore, even in the lower worlds, there are none that grasp him, even though he permeates all worlds and animates them with a life force suited to each individual creature, each individual created being in particular. And nevertheless, Hashem is not affected. It's not affected by Hashem, of course. And Alter Rebbe goes on to say that this is not like the soul connecting to the body. We spoke about it a couple of lessons ago, that he says, although it says that Hashem filling the world is similar in many ways to the soul filling the body, but here when the soul goes into the body, the soul is affected by the body. If a person, let's say, is in pain, his thinking is different. His feeling is different. It affects, the soul is affected, the mood can be affected, everything can be affected from the physical body. But Hashem fills the world and yet is not affected in any way. So for this vestment is not like that of the soul of a man which clothes itself within the body and is grasped within it to the extent that it is affected and influenced by the changes involved in the body and its pain, such as from blows or cold or heat or fire and the like. The Holy One, blessed be He, however, is not affected by any of the changes of this world, from summer to winter and from day to night. As it is written, even darkness does not obscure for you, and the night illuminates like the day. So light and day by Hashem is the same. For he is not grasped within the world at all, even though he feels them. So again, this is something which is way above our understanding. But yet we talk about it, we understand that we can understand that what we don't understand. And we can understand that there is something which is we grasp through faith and through beliefs. So this is the end of today's shir. We shall continue tomorrow. Be'ezrat Hashem.